Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik with Figure It Out Productions. The following video is part of our Quick Shoot series.
Hey guys, it's Adam here, and welcome to part 6.5 of my 5th video game generation retrospective. Now, if you're watching this in the playlist, the reason it's 6.5 is because when I made this original series, I didn't own this particular console, the Apple Pippin. And so I'm kind of shoving it in retroactively, so it fits in between the PlayStation and the N64, so that's where it's going. And of course, if you're watching this around the time it came out, hey, welcome, we're going to talk about the Apple Pippin. One of the most mythological game consoles ever released. And I use that word because it's hard to believe this thing was ever even real. I mean, like, a lot of people deny it. A lot of people don't even know, yeah, Apple made a game console. This is their one and only attempt at ever doing so. And I'm lucky enough to have one, so we're going to talk about it. Now, the backstory behind how this console came out is incredibly convoluted, but here's my basic understanding of it. So in the late 80s, Apple, of course, was a big juggernaut in home computers, and they wanted to create their own proprietary format. They had no interest in video games. But when I mean proprietary format, I mean like they wanted their own VHS or their own DVD or CD or Blu-ray, you know, like a concept piece of disc media or media in general that they owned. Like JVC owned VHS, Sony and Philips together kind of owned CD, I believe Sony and Philips owned DVD, Sony owns Blu-ray, etc. That you could resell to other platforms, be it computers, game consoles, whatever. That was what they wanted. Now, how did that turn into this? Not entirely sure, but one thing I do know was that they basically started working with Bandai, the Japanese company, and their attempt was to put this format into a device that they would then make successful, and people would see how great that format was, and then people would want to put that format into other places. Apple partially entered the video game market with that, and then the other big motivator was the same thing that was motivating a lot of companies basically in the 90s to get into video games, was that Sega had, and I've said it a lot of times, but Sega has proved that the Genesis meant you didn't have to be Nintendo to make video games and be successful. Theoretically, anyone could do it, and somebody was going to be successful. Obviously, that proved to be the PlayStation, but there was no real reason why Apple theoretically couldn't do that. Now, apparently, at the time, Steve Jobs was he was not up for this idea, but of course he was fired in, I believe it was the early 90s, so by the time they got around to the Pippin, it didn't matter, he wasn't there anymore. And so they released this in 1995 in Japan. Now, it's strange for a lot of reasons. So, when they created the console, like I said, they wanted their own proprietary format. And then they had this kind of, almost like what 3DO wanted to do. They wanted to have this, basically, not only did they want to have a console that would become the only game console, but they wanted to have a format that would kind of become the only format, right? Now, the reason this is strange is that this console did not ultimately use its own format. It just uses CD-ROMs. So it's like the one reason it was originally conceived isn't even in there. It almost feels like that's how the idea started, and then they kept building on it, and they got to a certain point, they're like, well, let's get rid of this thing, this part doesn't make any sense anymore. And then they were just left with this. So it was kind of like, what was the point? But anyway, so yeah, this thing was released in '95 in Japan through Bandai. Now, if you're confused as to why that would be, because basically in Japan it was the Bandai Pippin, whereas in North America and Europe it was the Apple Pippin. Basically, in the Japanese market there is a problem then, and it still exists now, which is that a lot of foreign products, foreign to Japan, cannot get into Japan and work successfully. Very ironically, Apple is very successful there now. They're one of the few non-Japanese companies that can actually make money in Japan under their own name, along with like Coca-Cola. They're like the only ones that can. But at the time they couldn't, so they were like, all right, we'll have Bandai do it. I mean, like, this is still a common thing. Like, apparently EA and WB Games both use Sega as a distributor for their games in Japan, which I only found out a few months ago at the time I made this video, through some show that Sega had a few months ago, which is strange. But anyway, so they released this in Japan, and it wasn't exactly successful. It did okay. I mean, all things considered, you know, it was actually selling some units, but it wasn't like a big hit. They released it in North America and Europe, where it was a disaster. A fucking disaster. From what I've heard, in North America, it sold maybe a few thousand units. Maybe. It retailed at $600 in 1995 and just tanked. And apparently in Europe it did even worse, if you can imagine that. We're talking maybe a few hundred units. Now getting real specifics on that is really difficult. So that was the best I could find. So apparently part of the reason, even though they shipped a lot of units to both regions, part of the reason you never see these things is because Bandai told Apple, like, look, just ship them all back to Japan. Just ship them all to Japan. We actually have a shot of moving them here, whereas you do not there. So essentially they were recalled, and that's why you never see them. Because the only way you would see them, other than if they were imported from Japan, was if someone actually bit the bullet in '95, paid $600, and held on to it, and sold it on eBay or put it in a store or still has it or whatever. Because it's almost impossible to actually find the original versions that were released here. So yeah, it ultimately was a complete disaster outside of Japan, and there it wasn't a big success either. I mean, ultimately, I think it only had something like 50 games released for it, and I think only like 5 of them ever got released outside of Japan. So yeah, that's a brief history of this thing. Basically, in '97, it was discontinued when Steve Jobs came back to Apple and saved them from bankruptcy. Believe it or not, if you don't know this, Apple was really big into the original Steve Jobs movement. They fired him, they completely fell apart, releasing tons of really weird products, this being one of them. And as soon as he came back and he released, he brought them back with the iPod and turned them into what they are now, this was one of the first things he apparently axed, was like, get rid of that damn thing. He expressed no interest in video games. It's like the one entertainment medium he never got into. It is what it is. It's funny though, because, all right, from a technical perspective, I really don't know what this thing's capable of, because I don't know a whole lot about Apple's hardware at the time. When I went to school, at public schools at the time, there was a lot of Macs. Apple would try to donate a lot of computers to public schools in an effort to get kids to like use Macs. That way when they went home, that's what they would want instead of a PC. Certainly didn't work on me. Aside from my original iPod, which simply hasn't died yet, this is the only Apple product I own. So I'm not sure if it's comparable to basically the Macintoshes they were releasing at the time. The OS on it is extremely similar. Like, it actually has a file and an edit and browse and like the drop tabs, and it's really strange. If we had to compare it to a game console, I would guess, although I'm not actually sure of this, that it's probably on par with like the PlayStation 1, which would make sense given the time it was released. But yeah, I have no idea what this thing is capable of if someone really tried to push it. So there you go. Now, yeah, I guess that's kind of it on its history. I mean, it was short-lived in that sense. Now, I guess I want to tell you a little bit about my own personal experience with this thing, which is also kind of difficult to do because I've kind of told you all these things, but I guess we should consolidate it into one video. Now, growing up, like I said, this thing was a mythological console. I remember I have vague memories basically of like being on the playground, at school, and somebody being like, dude, Apple, they released a game console. No, they didn't, shut up, there's no way, why aren't we seeing it anywhere? Where is it? And no one could ever prove it because no one fucking had one. And it was just something like somebody heard it somewhere and it just kind of spread around. You have to understand, this is before the internet is what it is now. You couldn't just Google something and find out if it was true or not. It was just kind of like word of mouth. And it wasn't until years later when I found out, holy shit, the thing, that was real. Apple really did do this. And they sure seem to hide it. They seem to kind of pretend they never made this thing. So I remember, I think it was only a few years ago actually, I went down to a local video game store here in Chicago, and I just went there to browse, and they had a Pippin in the box. I was blown away. It was the North American version too. I was like, wow, because I had never seen one in person. I mean, there it was, the unicorn of game consoles. I was floored. And so I wanted to find out how much it was, naturally, because I was like, I need to have this. And then when they told me the amount of money it cost, I was like, I don't really need to have this. And I left. And then I came home, and I think I don't remember how long it was at least a few days, where it was just kind of like eating me up, knowing that that could very realistically be the only Apple Pippin within like 500 miles. You know, it's just sitting like a few miles away from me. And I was like, man, maybe I should go do that. Maybe I'm that stupid that I should actually go down there and put that amount of money into this console. So I remember I went down there with the amount of money it costs, constantly telling myself, you're not going to buy it. It's not going to happen. You know, like, you're bringing the amount that's necessary to purchase it by coincidence. You're not really going to buy it. So then I got there, and it was gone. So I remember asking the people at the counter, like, you know, where's that Apple Pippin? They were like, wow, we can't believe you even saw it. You know, like, it was only here for a few hours. Like, somebody came in and just got that immediately, and I was like, fuck! You know, like, I wasted that chance. Ultimately, that proved to be okay. But yeah, so that was the first time I'd ever seen one. But again, it was behind glass. It was in a box. You know, I didn't really get to see it per se. And fast forward to summer of 2015, I went to Gamescom in Germany. And I went up to their like retro games section. And you guys can actually see this if you want. I did a Gamescom video where I showed like all my experiences and stuff. And you can actually see the footage of me seeing the Gamescom, or seeing the seeing the Pippin for the first time. And just being like, holy shit! Like a Pippin, and I played it for the first time ever, and I was playing some weird point-and-click game. I don't know what game it was. I couldn't actually find the name of it, as I recall. So it wasn't that good. But I remember just being like, holy shit, a Pippin! I'm playing a Pippin! This is so cool! And that was the first time I ever played one, and I did as much of a review on it at the time as I possibly could, considering it wasn't mine, and I really shouldn't have been touching it all that much. So I got home, and I got a message from a buddy of mine named Stefan who lives in Germany. Ironically, he wasn't in Germany when I was. He was living in Japan. And he's like, dude, you know, the Pippin is not that hard to find here. If you want, I can have one sent to you. And I was like, yeah, but I mean, I've looked on eBay. They're pretty expensive. I mean, if you look on eBay right now, you probably will not find the European or American one. I think I've seen one once up there, and they're obscene. The Japanese ones are much cheaper, but they're still really expensive. And he's like, yeah, they're price gouging. Like, I can get you one for like half that. I was like, really? He's like, yeah. So he did it. He picked one up. I paid him for it, of course. And he shipped it over. And you guys saw me unbox it, hopefully, if you watched that video. I unboxed it, and I was like, holy shit, a fucking Pippin! And here it is. So that's kind of been my entire experience with the thing. Looking at the back certainly reveals a lot about it. Fortunately, importing it wasn't really that big of a deal, because this has got to be one of history's most import-friendly consoles. Not only are the games region-free, there's no issues there, but if you actually look on the back, you can see the power supply supports 100 volts, 240 volts, 50 hertz, 60 hertz video frequencies. Meaning, you know, it'll work in pretty much any country on any type of television. It even has onboard VGA out, which is kind of impressive. The only other console I can think of that maximizes with VGA is the Sega Dreamcast. It has a switch there for NTSC and PAL, has S-Video, Composite, and as well as some additional ports for printer support and internet connectivity, believe it or not. The device itself is actually, it's very heavy, surprisingly, and it actually feels very sturdy. It doesn't feel cheap. It definitely feels like a lot of the Apple products that they were pushing in the mid to late 90s. This is its controller. It looks horrendous. It really does. It's got this weird boomerang look. It's one of those controllers that most people have never held. They just look at it and assume it must suck. Here's what I'm going to tell you. It's a comfortable controller, physically. Like, it's a little odd, yes. It has this kind of strange D-pad, but it works fine. It's got 4 face buttons. They're kind of oddly placed, but they're fine. It's got this ball mouse thing in the center. Like, this is actually for a mouse. Like, you rotate this and a little mouse cursor will move on the screen. Odd, but not necessarily bad. I mean, it was designed, again, for like a lot of point-and-click games. Because it was supposed to kind of, I think part of the reasoning behind this was that they were going to probably double a lot of their Macintosh games over to this. But some of the stuff that's really strange is it's got 3 buttons on the bottom of the controller. I can't think of any other controllers that have buttons on the bottom that are actually intended for gameplay use. Like, maybe sometimes you'll find like a sync button or something down there, but yeah. And then it's got 2 triggers up there, which is fine. Physically, it's fine. And it's got these little grooves that actually is kind of comfortable to hold. The part where it gets strange is how the buttons are mapped. See, when you have a controller like this, if you were to, you know, say, play a game, and you saw, like, the title screen, you would expect to hit start, right? Well, there's no start button. So you go, all right, my backup is going to be like, you know, the equivalent of A or X or whatever, some usually the bottom face button is what we associate in North America and Europe as being like the confirmation button. In Japan, it's usually the one over to the right, which in this case would be the green one. You probably, I'll give you a second, but you probably will never guess what that confirmation button is on this controller. Anybody? It's the right trigger, and you never get used to it. You never get used to it. Like I never ever think of the right trigger as the button to like essentially the equivalent of A in a game. That's very odd. So yeah, there you go. Physically, the controller's fine. It's just the way it's mapped that's really, really odd. Now, I would love to show you guys some games that I've got and like some recommendations in the event you ever get an Apple Pippin. Unfortunately, I can't do that. I don't own any. I have like some browser software and like Paint, you know, like stuff that came with the most basic version of the console, but I don't own any actual games. As I mentioned, there was only a few released, and I think over here I will never find one. If I went to Japan, I would have a shot at perhaps finding a shovelware title at best. They're not common. But there is one plus. This console is capable of reading burned games, which I never really advocate, but in this instance, what the hell else are you going to do? I mean, there's really no choice. So I was looking through the Pippin library, and there was always one game I knew was on the Pippin, and it became the only game that was really worth my interest, per se. It was the only one that caught my eye and went, holy shit, I do need to try that one. There was a Power Rangers Zeo game. Now, as you can tell based on this shirt, I do like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the original series, and of course Zeo is what came after it. So I was always like, I love the other Power Rangers games. I've got some from the Genesis here, and all the ones I grew up with on Super Nintendo, etc. So I was always curious about that one. So I found it, I downloaded it, I burned it, I tried it. And I'm going to show you some gameplay of it, which I don't usually do in these videos. I like to keep these as just a discussion video. But in this instance, it's such an uncommon console, an uncommon game, I think, that it's actually worth kind of showing you some of it. So before we go into that, though, there is one last thing I want to say about how strange this console is. If you look at its dashboard, if you turn on the console, you'll see this image. Okay, so this is essentially the console like saying, hey, Jack, put a disc in. Every like minute or so, it will make this noise. Pippin. Yeah, I don't know why. And the only, I don't know if I mentioned this before, I think I did, but if I didn't, the only other real thing you'll ever really get out of this console for entertainment purposes is music CDs. This is what the music CD dashboard looks like, you know, if you pop in one. They obviously took that feature somewhat seriously because on the front, I should have mentioned this before, but on the front of the console, there's actually multiple buttons here for playback of music. You can play, you can stop, you can fast forward, rewind, eject, of course. And there's actually a headphone jack right on the front. So, and you can raise the volume or minimize the volume right there on the dash. So it obviously they obviously wanted to push music CDs.
All right, and you're seeing an Apple Pippin loading up a game. As I've showed you before, it has this little file menu system thing it does first. I cut that out for this. But yeah, after that it goes into the actual game. And the load times on this machine, absolutely terrible, though not really surprising considering the time. This game was, of course, made by Bandai, which obviously played a large role in this particular console, as I explained before. So it makes perfect sense that they would put out a Power Rangers Zeo game, because Power Rangers was a huge Bandai property. So I'm assuming they believed that this would be some sort of system seller type of game, which, I don't know, maybe the game itself is not good, but I could see why they would think that. And you'll see it loads, there's load game support. This console actually does support game saves, though I'm not entirely certain how that works. I'm going to let you guys watch this opening cutscene real quick.
Welcome, Rangers. You have arrived just in time. A new evil is threatening the planet Earth. This new evil comes in the form of the Machine Emperor, his family, and their legion of diabolical henchmen. The goal of this empire is to rid the galaxy of all human life forms. A short time ago, the Emperor constructed a machine monster factory on the Earth's moon. This factory will turn out the massive army the Emperor will need to achieve his goal. To power this factory, the Empire has erected a large transformer that pulled the life out of the Earth's rainforests and jungles. The reports we have received indicate...
Really? You humans are such fools. The Machine Empire is here, and it is here forever. In a short time, we will have the greatest army ever assembled, and then the human race will be a thing of the past. But just in case you Power Rangers were getting any ideas of trying to stop me, I have decided to relieve you of your Zeo crystals. Weak humans, try and stop me now.
Do not worry. All is far from lost. The Zeo crystals have their own unique molecular structure which vibrate with special homing frequency. I have located the first crystal, and I am working on pinpointing the locations of the others. The red Zeo crystals hidden somewhere in the back alleys and streets of Lowtown. On your way to recover the crystal, you will encounter Cogs, the Machine Empire's soldiers. But that is not the worst. Guarding the red Zeo crystal is one of the Emperor's henchmen. You can only succeed by working together. After you select a ranger, you will be transported to your first mission. Good luck.
Well, that was special, wasn't it? The audio apparently sounds like it's mono. I'm not sure if this console even supports stereo, which I didn't really notice until I got into post-production here. Now, setting aside the oddity of if he took away the Zeo power crystals, how would they be able to be Power Rangers, and how would you even be able to play this game? I don't know, but fuck it, it's a kid's game, right? Now, yeah, so the cheese, man, so strong. And I mean, this is just one example of a game. Obviously, I have no others that I can even attempt to test, or any other game that even really intrigued me all that much. Obviously, this console was somewhat FMV heavy, but here's gameplay, and you have no idea how bizarre this is to try and play. Now, it looks like it should be simple, like a simple, like Street Fighter, Streets of Rage type of, obviously it's not Street Fighter, but Streets of Rage type of side-scrolling beat-em-up is essentially what this game thinks it is. But it's so rubbery, and the hit detection, man, it's like, you don't understand unless you try to play this. It's so awkward to actually play, and that makes me sad. But yeah, you know, I know that I expect a lot of comments to be like, wow, what a shitty console, blah, blah, blah. But the thing is, the console itself isn't that bad. I mean, from a hardware perspective, it's fine. It's obviously reliable. It works. It's built solidly. I don't know exactly enough about what's under the hood. Yes, it obviously has a shitty game library, but that doesn't necessarily make it a bad console. Now, interestingly, I don't know, that's actually a subject I've been thinking about just doing a video on, like, what defines a console as being good, and, you know, does it go beyond the games, or is that all that matters? You know, you guys tell me if you'd be interested in seeing, like, something like that, but, yeah, so I do apologize for how bad it must look like I'm sucking ass in this game, but you have no idea, unless you try to play this, how awkward it is to play this shit. Now, of course, I recorded this, I used the VGA out mode, and it doesn't look great. I'm sure it's better looking than the alternatives. I looked at them. It looks better on my television than it does in the recording, for what that's worth. I don't know what to pin that on exactly, but yeah, so this was recorded with a VGA to HDMI scaler, and it displays better than it records, for what that's worth. And obviously in this particular game, I decided to play as the Red Ranger. In this case, it would be Tommy, played by Jason David Frank, who I actually met at a signing thing. That was really cool. He signed a bunch of stuff for me, because I have some old Power Ranger stuff laying around. Also, check out this music. Get used to that, because it never stops. It sounds absolutely nothing like any Power Rangers music. This was my first playthrough of it. I did this. I wanted to try this for you guys and just see how it would go, but it didn't go very well. And I kept trying later to play this game some more and see how far I could get, and I couldn't do it, man. The controls are so awkward and rubbery, and those little power gem things, you have to get all of those to beat the level. And some of them are in really awkward positions, and there's no, like, your character doesn't like get health back. There's no health pickups anywhere, so you just die all the time. But yeah, guys, that's essentially it. I hope you enjoyed this on this obscure, strange console. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope if you're still watching this in the playlist that you enjoy the next video, which is the N64. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all later.